Good morning. Maybe we can start, because we have quite a tight schedule today. And to open our event, I would like to ask the host of the event, Ministry of Environmental Protection and Regional Development of Latvia, to say a few words, welcoming note. And today it will be Kristina Zomere-Rochenkova. So, please.
Good morning, dear participants. On behalf of Climate Change Department, I would like to thank you all very much for coming to this Science Policy Forum on Climate Change Adaptation. I wish you all this 1.5 day fruitful discussions and good work on this very sensitive issue. And let this forum be a source of good knowledges and a good cooperation platform for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. So we, on behalf of the organizing team, at the moment we are 3. It's me, Julia Dubashinska from Latvia, Victoria Matsaikaite, and Lula Sinisov from Victoria is from Lithuania, Lula is from Estonia. We're here to help you, whatever questions you have, and also since it's a multicultural event, if any one of you during the event would like to ask a question in your own language, please feel free to do so. We will be able to help you and translate. So a little bit quickly about the event itself. So this project, our event, is implemented in the context of a bigger European project funded by European Commission, DG Climate Action. And it is implemented by consultant Milieu with partners. And in the Baltic states, it's in Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian environment. And the main aim is to further the development and implementation of climate change adaptation plans in the region, and also foster the cooperation between scientists and policymakers in this question. And as you see, the same events or similar events are organized also in other countries. It's other 7 events in Bulgaria, Czech Republic and Slovak Republic, Romania, Hungary, Slovenia and Croatia, Greece, Cyprus and Poland. So this issue is quite important in many regions. And quickly about what are the aims of our event. So on the first day, we will start with overview of the current situation in the 3 Baltic states. What are the problems, issues, and we will hear presentations of the representatives of the ministries in 3 countries. Then we will look at the perspective of policymakers and their cooperation with scientific institutions, and we will hear other 3 presentations from scientists who will also give their feedback on how the cooperation is going on in this field in our countries. And at the end of this second part, we will have also a chance to discuss these issues and maybe share our experience and probably make some proposals on how this cooperation can be improved. And the last part of our today's event will be a session on Climate Adapt. It's a very important and useful platform run by a European Environmental Agency. And you will, for those who have never used this platform before, it will be a good chance to find out how useful it can be in your work, and for others maybe to learn some news about this platform, what has changed. And later we will have a small interactive session where everyone will be able to use this platform in practice and see if you think that it's useful. And also what's very important, one of the key aims of our event is maybe give some feedback on how do you think that this platform is doing what it's aimed for, and how it can be improved, and what information can be shared on, by this platform, using this platform. And today we also have the representative from European Environmental Agency here, and she will listen to all your comments, and they will reach the right ears. And tomorrow, on the second day, which is a half day, there will be I think it will be also a very interesting session where everyone will be able to hear practical examples of how climate change adaptation plans were introduced in other countries where maybe they are more advanced than our countries in Baltic states, in Baltic region, but also some local examples. And obviously everyone will get a chance to ask the questions, and finally we will end up with a little group work, national group work, where representatives of each country can sort of give their feedback on, maybe see how the knowledge and things that they've learned during the event can be implemented in their own countries. And that's pretty much it. So now we will start. And to give the presentation on the current EU adaptation strategy and policies, I would like to invite a representative of European Environmental Agency, Kati Matern, and she will tell us a bit more on this important issue.
Thank you, Julia. Good morning. Oops. Thank you. Good morning to everybody in the room. I'm very glad that so many people came to this event. I would like to start by introducing myself. My name is Kati Matern. I work at the European Environment Agency in the Air and Climate Change Program, and in particular in the Climate Adaptation Group. I'm a project manager, and I'm responsible for the maintenance and further development of Climate Adapt. I'm a seconded national expert from Germany, from the Federal Environment Agency of Germany. The EEA is located in Copenhagen. It is our building, only to give you a short impression of where we come from. Oops. Can I do this here? Yeah. Okay. Since I'm not a member of the staff of the European Commission, I can't give you a detailed, in-depth view in the European adaptation strategy, but I would like to give you a short overview, and please be patient with me if I can't answer any question. I would like to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. And in particular, I would like to highlight the contributions of the EEA to the strategy. I don't want to go into any detail. I assume everybody of you in the room knows what the situation is regarding mitigation and adaptation. In order to reach the 2 degrees goal, we have to do a lot of efforts in mitigation. But despite all these efforts we already have and observe impacts of climate change, and we know that we have to adapt, and we also know that the later we start, the more expensive it will be. There are some numbers on the slides. I would only like to highlight that €1 invested in flood protection saves €6 in damage costs. Maybe you have still in mind at the moment occurring flood at the Balkan region in Croatia and Bosnia and Serbia. So we have living examples at the moment what climate change and adaptation means. Oops, no, it was the wrong way. So what is the situation now? I only want to show you this map as an overview. This map is based on the EEA impacts report of 2012. And here you can see the impacts in Europe of climate change. And we know from the current released report of the IPCC, of the Working Group 2 on impacts, which was launched in April, that we can observe severe impacts all over the world. Every country is, almost every country is influenced in a different way. Despite the wealth of the countries, they are all vulnerable to some extent. And we see already that we have impacts that are irreversible. And especially in Europe, it is projected that we will have more an increase in the frequency and in the extent of extreme events like rainfalls, and this will lead to more flood damages if we don't take action. We have more heat waves, especially in southern parts of Europe, but also elsewhere. That means I'm not very much in detail and informed about the situation in the Baltic states. I'm curious to learn more at this event, but I'm sure you will have also several impacts. Oops, wrong way. So I only want to highlight the adaptation policy cycle to show you, maybe you are very familiar with this flow of actions towards adaptation activities. This is very well known from the adaptation support of Climate Adapt and also from the guidance from the European Commission how to develop adaptation strategies. This could serve as a red line through the presentation. Maybe you're very familiar with this. We should firstly assess impacts and vulnerabilities, identify adaptation options, assess these options which are available, which ones we can use, then implement actions, and last but not least, we have to report what we have done, and we have to evaluate and eventually revise our strategies and actions. Having in mind this policy cycle, we could state what have we done so far in Europe. We have, we have national adaptation strategies in 20 member countries. We have some action plans and few concrete actions. We have vulnerability assessments, a few only. We have some dedicated adaptation portals. We have a lot of research going on in the member states and also at EU level. We have only the starting phase of monitoring and evaluation. And especially in cities, we have some adaptation strategies all over Europe and sector-specific actions, but only a limited amount of implemented adaptation activities. So, that means you have seen we have action at the national level, but why do we need an EU adaptation strategy? Impacts have very often the character of cross-bordering dimensions. If you see the floods, the river basins don't stop at national boundaries, and also other things have a bigger dimension, and missing action in one member state can lead to damages in another member state. So it's very good that at EU level and at a broader range, action covering the whole EU can be done. And also it's necessary that the EU will implement adaptation in all the policies which are in place at EU level. On the other hand, it's also effective when the EU is complementing the national activities by capacity building and research and the data gathering and knowledge transfer at EU level. And in addition, it's very important to help those countries which don't have built up until now many capacities to cope with climate change. And also, the EU is giving a lot of funds to and has a lot of investments to adapt existing measures and to help the member states to implement adaptation measures and plans. I don't want to go into detail. I have done a screenshot of the strategy package. This is the EU adaptation strategy. It is a whole package of documents. It includes mainly the communication, which is a description of the challenges we are facing in the EU, and also it includes a framework how we can cope with these challenges, which measures can be taken. In addition, There are guidance documents developed in the EU framework, for example, how to develop adaptation strategies. There are some papers on adaptation plans for vulnerable sectors like agriculture, fisheries, coastal and marine protection, and so on. And there are some staff papers how to on assessments of impacts and how to mainstream adaptation into the EU funds. All these the documents of the package are available at the EU at the Commission's page. What is now the content of the strategy? We can't do everything at the same time. Oops. We can't do everything at the same time, so we have to define priorities. And the Commission has defined 3 priority areas. The first one is promoting action by member states. The second one is better informed decision making. And the third is support adaptation in key vulnerable sectors. The first one means that the EU supports the member states in developing strategies and try to empower them to also adopt the strategies and to implement action plans. They will deliver funds and also help to build up the capacities. The second one is EU will help to close them, to identify the knowledge gaps, to close them, to transfer practical experiences, good practices, and so on. And the third one is that the EU will help to concentrate on the improvement of the adaptation policies in the key vulnerable sectors, and also to make the European infrastructure more resilient. What does it mean in detail? The EU has defined 8 actions grouped into these 3 priority areas. I don't want to go into every detail here, but only to give you an overview that the first one is that, as I already mentioned, they have developed guidelines how to develop adaptation strategies. They will develop an adaptation preparedness scoreboard, and this should show everybody where the member states are in the continuing work on adaptation policy process, and they will give the whole picture in 2017 and to revise the European strategy on to how to adapt the new development. The next one is that what I already said, they deliver funds. For example, the LIFE Fund has a big part devoted to adaptation, to support practical measures in the member states. And also a very special part is dedicated to cities because they have special problems. Here I want to highlight the new initiative, the Mayors Adapt initiative. This initiative was launched by the Commission, and there, like in the other Mayors initiative, the cities can sign here to voluntarily commit themselves to develop adaptation plans and actions. And they can also get a lot of supportive material here to do this. The second priority is the better informed decision making. Here, Climate Adapt, which Julia already mentioned, plays an important role. The knowledge which will be generated with the help of the EU organizations will be presented in Climate Adapt to help the member states to use this knowledge. And also the research program of the DG RTD, also research, will be there will be included a big amount of money dedicated to adaptation. And also, as Julia also mentioned, EU will support the policy science interface to get more direct links. To support the adaptation in the key vulnerable sectors, means that EU has developed guidance how to come forward in these policy areas, and also will support the capacity building in these areas. And to make the infrastructure in the EU more resilient, the EU launched an initiative to revise the existing standards in infrastructure to revise them to get more resilient in future to all the impacts of climate change. And in addition, the EU tries to foster to build up the market on insurances to get a better coverage of the population of the economy to disaster risks which are caused by climate change. One important element, I assume for you, is how this will be implemented. To show you that adaptation doesn't mean that we give up to mitigate, means that the adaptation part is is connected to the mitigation policy. We have the goals to lower the emissions by 20% and to higher the energy efficiency and to use more renewables up to 20% until 2020. And the EU has dedicated up to 20% of the budget to climate action measures. And this will also traced by a monitoring system, how this will be done. And in the lower bottom of the slide, you can see a lot of abbreviations. These are all the European funds. They all start with E, European, and end with F, funds. There are 5 funds are named. I don't know every detail of every fund. There is the Rural Development Fund, the Cohesion Fund, and the Marine Fisheries Fund, and also Agriculture and Rural Development and Social Fund. And all these funds deliver funds for money for the member states to use to develop adaptation measures and plans and actions. And I would like to show you, because I also don't know every detail, where you can access these funds. The Commission has developed fact sheets, 11 fact sheets, which are available at the Commission's website, where you can read and get all the information how to access these funds. Now I come to the part which I'm more familiar with, the more technical part, how the European Environment Agency is supporting the Commission in implementing the strategy. Here you can see a series of reports. Some reports are lying there on the table. We have produced as an agency which is delivering data and integrated assessments and sectoral analysis to support the policy process on adaptation. I would like to mention the impacts report of 2008 and 2012, where all the impacts of climate change to Europe are described. And in addition, the urban report on urban adaptation, and the last one was the 2013 report on time to adapt on the adaptation landscape in Europe. And at the bottom of the page, you can see the ongoing activity of the EEA on maintaining the portal Climate Adapt. I only would like to highlight two examples of these reports. One is the 2012 impact report, where you can see in detail how Europe is affected by climate change. And there, as a key message, we can see that that different parts of Europe are affected in special ways, and the costs also differ from area to area. And there are a lot of impact indicators, less vulnerability indicators, and no adaptation indicators. But you can see the observed and projected climate change. The next one is the urban report. I assume that in the Baltic States, you have the majority of people also living in cities. And cities have special problems. They have the heat waves, urban heat island problem. There are very often also facing problems with heavy rain events, and also they have to look for water retention and so on. And therefore, this report describes the challenges and possible solutions, how to invest in the infrastructure in cities, and how to use soft measures like the green infrastructure to improve the resilience of cities to climate change. The last one is the Time to Adapt report, which shows what's already going on in Europe regarding adaptation to climate change, which measures have been detected by research and which have already been implemented with solutions. There are examples included, and also some knowledge gaps have been depicted, like the need for indicators and to monitor and evaluate our success in climate change adaptation, and in addition to also identify more cost-benefit analysis, and these are two of the knowledge gaps. To give you an outlook what EEA is doing in future to support the Commission in implementing the strategy is that we host the Climate Adapt platform to deliver access to the knowledge on adaptation and climate change projections, and this will be described in our afternoon session. We do integrated assessments, like I have shown you the reports, and the next one is the assessment report on adaptation strategies and actions in Europe, which is coming in the third quarter of this year, based on the self-assessment we have done with the member states. The next one in 2016 will be an update of the indicator-based assessment impacts report. And in 2016, we will also update this time to adapt report to show which measures have been taken and which action plans are implemented. And in addition, we have thematic reports. I will name two of them. The next one will be a report still this year on transport, and the next one on urban adaptation. And we are also updating our indicators. You will find them at the EEA website, the indicators on climate change, and you can also access them via Climate Adapt. Thank you very much. Now.
Thank you, Kati. And we have a question and answer session planned at the end of this first part of the presentation. So if you have any questions, please put them down or remember, and you will get a chance to ask them later. And next, I would like to invite Maxi Nachtingal, Representative Council of Baltic Sea States. And here we will go from EU level to narrowing down to Baltic Sea level.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction. I think I'm more afraid of what's happening with the technical details here because I'm trying to do a Prezi, which is usually the biggest challenge when you do this kind of presentations. Okay. It's loading, I can tell you, so there is hope. So thank you very much once again. My name is Maxi Nachtigal. I'm representing the Council of the Baltic Sea States. We're placed with our secretariat in Stockholm. Here we go. And I was invited here today, which is super nice, to present you an overview about what is happening in the Baltic Sea region as a whole, as a macro region, concerning climate change adaptation. Why am I... No, hang on, I'm not there yet. Thanks. Many of you have met me because we have been cooperating with countries around the Baltic Sea region, all of them, including Russia, since around 2009, 2010, I would say, working on climate change, not only adaptation but also mitigation. But this presentation here today will so focus on climate change adaptation, empowering the Baltic Sea region to adapt to the expected and already happening impacts of climate change. But what I'm going to show you is basically the whole process we have done, coming from a general statement made by ministers, going over to the EU Baltic Sea region strategy, working with individual countries in a project, coming up with the climate change adaptation strategy for the whole Baltic Sea region, and then a follow-up process since 2013, basically on the policy side. But let me start with this. Most of you have probably read the 5th IPCC report, and there is this very nice thing which is called the solution space in managing risk related to climate change. And that looks like this. And I love this picture because I'm a policymaker, so I can say this. I don't understand a single word. I mean, I understand the words, but in the way it's put together, it's super complex. And if this is the sphere in which all of you have to move when we want to look into how to adapt and mitigate what is happening, then this is going to be a huge job. And the main thinking should be, of course, well, if every one of us is supposed to do this and navigate in this sphere alone, we're in big trouble and we will probably not be able to adapt or mitigate anything until it's too late. So what to do? Usually what's happening is then policy people and specifically ministers and the politicians come up and say, we have to adapt and we have to mitigate and we have to do all of this. And my organization is in this nice position that from time to time we get this really clear statements from ministers, and here's from a ministerial session of the Council of the Baltic Sea States in 2011, where it says that they would like to see that countries work more closely together to adapt to what is happening, considering climate change in the Baltic Sea region. So they basically already back in 2011 welcomed what at that point in time was happening under climate change in the so-called EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region. And that would be the next point. Because despite ministers discussing and basically putting nice words on emerging challenges, something else happened, which is the EU Baltic Sea region strategy. And within the EU Baltic Sea region strategy, climate change at that point in time is handled under a horizontal action, which is the horizontal action sustainable development. And my organization, again, CBSS, we're taking care of this horizontal action. How many of you have heard about the EU Baltic Sea region strategy or have worked with the strategy? Okay, that's, I would say, a third of you, which is fine, which is great. It's more than usual. I don't want to explain to you the EU strategy, but look at this because it makes an impact on the priorities that are given across the whole region on what member states should potentially cooperate on together, and where we have there are defined transnational challenges we all should basically take care of and work together to take care of it. And as you can see, under the horizontal action sustainable development, climate change, mitigation and adaptation is one of the topics. Countries, not only the scientists and the politicians should come together, basically all involved in working with adaptation and mitigation. So then under or within the framework of the EU Baltic Sea region strategy, what they usually do after they have defined their objectives and their goals, they develop projects. Well, that's very nice. So you have some people that go out and make their hands dirty and basically try to find solutions to problems that are defined in a certain way. And in this case, the call in the EU Baltic Sea region strategy was to develop a climate change adaptation strategy for the whole macro region, the whole Baltic Sea region. And BaltAdapt as a project, funded by the Baltic Sea Region Program in the period 2007-2013, so the period that is just ending, they tried to do this. And that was a quite interesting process, I would say, because there you could see the policy-science interaction in practice. And I know there are some people in the room who have followed that process too, some project partners from BaltAdapt, and I remember the very first kick-off meeting where the scientists and the policymakers were together in one room, and the scientists out of the sudden realized, this is no research project, and the policymakers realized, we have to talk to scientists and we actually have to understand them. That's a problem. So there came up this very nice, non-violent fight about how should we work together. And this fight ended in the end with developing a couple of very nice outcomes which I would like to introduce to you because they're still available, and I think they're very relevant for the work all of you have to do in each of your countries to basically adapt to climate change. And in this project, the first thing what the scientists did basically were they developed these climate info bulletins. So here you can see state-of-the-art research on climate change related to air temperature, precipitation, wind climate, sea level rise. Well, you see it, you name it. If you go in there, you can download it, you can have a look at it. The data that is used here, it's maybe from the 2007, 2008, 2009, so it's still very up to date, but also be reminded that there is the second Baltic Sea region climate change report coming up, the BUC report, which is basically also an up-to-date summary of climate change impacts in the Baltic Sea region, worth reading. Then the next thing you can find, and that is a result of BaltAdapt, there is a gap fit analysis, regional climate information, but mostly or mainly important here also a couple of impact assessment reports and vulnerability assessment for different sectors for the whole Baltic Sea region. So have a look. It is pointing out a couple of things that might be relevant while you're developing your own strategies or while you're updating them. Then, bringing together science and policy, we had to, and the main goal was still to develop a climate change adaptation strategy for the whole region. So this down here was just the beginning and just the all information that had to be filtered and brought in to basically be digested by policymakers. So then the policymakers were invited to so-called policy fora, and we had 3 of them, as you see here. And we also run all the scientific reports and assessments with a couple of stakeholders in so-called stakeholder dialogues, mainly on tourism and agriculture, basically the 2 sectors we defined as one of the most important for the Baltic Sea region. And then, last but not least, and I think it's very worth mentioning here, the BaltAdapt partners, they developed material that fed into the so-called Baltic window that now goes into what is today, and Kati just introduced it, the EU Climate Adapt platform. So thanks to BaltAdapt, when you go there now, you will find quite an extensive knowledge on this platform that has been developed within the BaltAdapt partnership. And that's the final outcome. Since 2013, we do have a proposal for a climate change adaptation strategy for the whole Baltic Sea region, and that was given to member states in September 2013, but also back to us as horizontal action leaders for sustainable and being responsible for climate change adaptation, as I said. But now what? And I'm coming to my favorite phrase, and some of you have already heard it, but usually that's the end of it. You have a project, it's ended, that's the outcome document in the shelf, and dust collection goes on. Well, in that case, we obviously wanted to avoid this, so we had to come up with a policy process that continues the work done by the project and basically disseminates, but also brings further the process started under the BaltAdapt project. And what we have started is within the framework of the so-called Climate Change Dialogue platform for the Baltic Sea region, where we have arranged a couple of roundtables, the first one in December, and there was a second one just recently in April in Warsaw, and some of you have joined us there. And basically, the platform or the dialogue, the roundtable basically come up that they saw, and that's the main question always, they see a clear added value of cooperation across borders, and for climate change, I guess that's quite obvious. Secondly, the climate, because at that point we mainly cooperated with the member states, but it seems quite obvious that there is an interest to cooperate with other stakeholders and also need, and in that case it's other pan-Baltic organizations, mainly the Union of the Baltic Cities. You just heard from Kati the main concern concerning adaptation in cities, and VASAP there relating to spatial planning and some more, but also other stakeholders, and then we're mainly talking about the researcher side, of course. But there it's not where they're going to stop. They also want to come up with very concrete actions and joint activities, and it can be projects, that can be common events like joint events like here. And then on the 13th of May, which was like 2 weeks ago, we did the Pan-Baltic Roundtable, where we invited all these Pan-Baltic organizations that deal with climate change adaptation already in the region. And they came up with 6 very concrete topics for transnational interest, where they see cooperation should go on. And interestingly enough, you see here science policy business dialogues is on the very top of that list. Not that we intended any ranking, but most of them came up with this idea from the very beginning, to have the interaction between all the different stakeholders involved. And then, of course, dissemination and awareness raising, and so it continues. When you go to the strategy, which you can find on the Baltic website, still you see a long list of 11 macro-regional goals, and that is basically a priority made within the action plan that accompanies the strategy, that is prioritizing or helping to prioritize countries what to look at and what to focus on when they start their own adaptation strategy, writing their own adaptation strategies, or revising their already existing ones. So that leads us back to the strategy. Now I was also asked to give some lessons learned from this full circle of science policy process, but I look at Julia if I still have time. Good. What we learned, and the first example, pretty obvious, the science policy dialogue, you have to find a common language. If you can't find an understanding in a room where there are policymakers and scientists, how you want to talk to each other and how you ensure that you are sure you're understanding each other, then you're ending up in trouble. And often it takes a mediator. It takes often someone who goes in, who knows both sides, and is actually able to read the research report on the one end, and is able to speak to the policymakers what that would potentially mean for them when they write policies. Then the participatory approach. I spoke about the policy fora, where we brought in all the stakeholders, where we had the stakeholder dialogues in the different sectors. If you can't get, or let's say it like this, you have to try to get in everyone concerned in one room from the beginning. There is an example from Poland where they have started very much top-down, and then they had to go with a ready-made strategy to the regional and local level where the adaptation has to start. And then they were in trouble because the regional and local level said like, we don't really know what to do now. And that is an issue. It's nice to have a strategy on EU level and the macro-regional level and the national level, but if the people on the ground that have to do the adaptation, and that means locally and regionally, can't use it, what have we? Where's the added value? So think about it. Then there's this nice sentence, alone is not strong, alone is just alone. Meaning, try to call your neighbors, and there are different ways to do it because you're all in one boat, and it's not worth to reinvent the wheel. And be sure there are so many solutions, and there's so much knowledge already out there. Try to use it, and not to sit alone in your room and just try to do it on your own again. And it is worth to create a network of trust. So knowing that they have done good work in Estonia, or they have done very good work in Latvia, and just try to get to know who's in front, who's behind, how can we help each other, and how can we learn from each other. And this cooperation can have many faces. No one says you have to sit in a room for 2 weeks and just throw adaptation terms at each other. You can meet at conferences, but you could also do joint projects, or you can, as I said, just pick up the phone and call someone you have met somewhere who knows something, who can tell you another name that knows something that might support you. And then I'm always asked about this added value of macro-regional cooperation. Like, why should we do this in the Baltic Sea region? We can go to Brussels. We can just call our neighbors in the Baltic states. And I think the solution to especially adaptation lies somewhere between 2 bilateral cooperation and 28 all EU member states. There is obviously a difference if you meet with everyone in one room, all 28 EU member states who have different concerns and expecting different impacts on climate change. Or if you call just one person that's next to you, because that person only knows one part of the truth. So in that sense, I would always favor transnational cooperation, because at least in the Baltic Sea region, you have the doubt of 11. That's an advantage, I guess. And to strengthen that theory, there is a council conclusion from the 18th of June 2013 that supports this thinking of macro-regional cooperation, saying that because the awareness and preparedness to climate change is different from country to country, you should really start calling your neighbors and act in a macro-regional group. So I would like to encourage you to do that, and I think this conference here today is a great continuation of what's already going on in the region and a very added value add-on to cooperation in this field. And if you feel you want to contact us and cooperate in the future, then you're very welcome to do this as well. And that was it from my side today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Maxi, for entertaining and technically perfect presentation. And now from the Baltic Sea region, we will go to our Baltic countries. And now you will hear a short overview of what's going on in the climate adaptation field in our three countries. And we will begin with Latvia. And I would like to invite once again Christina to tell a little bit more on what's going on in Latvia.
So hello everybody once more. I'll give you a short overview of current status of climate change adaptation in Latvia. So what we have done and what we have done not in adaptation policy. As you see, climate change policy directions are wide in trans-sectoral way, and adaptation is one of them, but not less important. Latvian climate change policy is based in a wide extension to an international and EU climate policy processes, and which define duties of member states in climate change mitigation and adaptation. The last document that was approved 2 months ago is Environmental Policy Strategy for 2014-2020. And this document includes a section on adaptation, and one of the climate change policy goals is to facilitate Latvia's preparedness to adapt to climate change and its cost impact. Here I would like to stress just on a few documents. More important, it's a sustainable development strategy of Latvia until 2030 and the coastal special development guidelines until 2017. What we have done not until yet, we haven't national adaptation strategy, but it is under development. Until now, we have established two adaptation working groups. One is an inter-ministerial working group with representatives from different ministries. And the second one is a working group with scientists and experts from universities and other institutions which are dealing with climate adaptation issues. Last year, an informative report was submitted in government in the framework of the environmental policy strategy. And for this informative report, it was done a risk analysis, and were used expert assessments and semi-quantitative or qualitative risk analysis methods. There are always questions about climate change impact benefits. In the case of Latvia, vulnerabilities are erosion of sea coast, changes in sea and in inland water level and composition. It's a more often and intense storms and whirlwinds. It's extreme flood and drought, health hazards and biodiversity danger. As a benefits could be a longer vegetation period, reduction of potential frosts, reduction of mortality due to freeze, decreasing heating costs, and increased precipitation, especially in fall, will facilitate higher and more stable energy production in hydropower plants. Until now, on place we have some initiatives of few municipalities. It's Salisbury and Riga, which have their own adaptation strategies. We have measures to prevent flood in the Daugava basin and projected the development of flood risk maps for Latvia and main 3 river basins. It's Gauja, Ventonli, including Gauja. We have also forestry adaptation measures done by Latvia State Forests, and in the near future we are looking forward to start research and in various sectors. It's building, agriculture, forestry, civil protection, and emergency planning, landscape planning, and tourism. Also biodiversity and ecosystem services, health and well-being, including also maritime special planning and others. The main challenges we have, it's a lack of worldwide understanding of problematic issues, also between politicians and also in society as well. It's a lack of precise country-specific knowledge, also lack of data and monitoring. We have no continuity in researches regarding adaptation issues, and we have also limited institutional capacity and, of course, financial constraints. Latvia have applied for European Economic Area Financial Mechanism, a program, National Climate Policy. It consists of 2 predefined projects. One of them is development of proposal for national adaptation strategy, including identification of scientific data, measures for adapting to changing climate impact and cost evaluation, and also small grant schemes which relates to education and public awareness in adaptation issues. A little bit more about this adaptation project, which starts right now, and the main objective is to prepare a proposal for national adaptation strategy. Our partners will be Ministry of Agriculture, Latvian Environment Geology Meteorology Center, Latvian Institute of Aquatic Ecology, and from a Norwegian side, we will be a Norwegian Directorate for Civil Protection. The main 2 outputs of this program will be a developed climate change and impact scenario for 2050-2100, and it consists of climate change modeling, its projections and indicators, and firstly will be made a database of indicators for the adaptation monitoring system. And second one is a developed report on indicators, risks, and adaptation measures. It consists of flood risk maps of 3 river basin districts. It consists also of research for maritime spatial planning, and there will be 6 thematic reports on risk and vulnerability assessment and more suitable and cost-effective adaptation measures in fields which I also mentioned before. And there will be a policy proposal for national adaptation strategy, which includes international experience analysis, And also will be a national climate change and adaptation web portal where will be included all information on adaptation issues in Latvian and in English as well. So actually we are very looking forward to this project, as this will be an essential base for our national adaptation strategy and adaptation policy as a whole. So that's all for.
Thank you, Christina. And now I would like to invite representative of Estonian Ministry of Environment, Katra Kets, to give her presentation on the current state of affairs in Estonia.
Okay, thank you. Hello everyone, I'm from Ministry of Environment from Estonia, from the Department of Climate Change and Radiation. And I will give a short overview of, of the process of developing a national adaptation strategy in Estonia. And under our ministry's initiative, the development of adaptation strategy was subscribed. So I actually hope you allow me to have a seat, and I will continue here. Okay. So first, I would like to give you a little background information. First of all, to date, Estonia has largely been engaged in preparing for emergencies and mitigating climate change, and we don't have separate strategy or action plan for adaptation to the impact of the climate change. However, there is various projects that have been and continue to be implemented in Estonia, and the effects of climate change have been discussed in numerous research papers. But the information, it is quite scattered between agencies and areas, and of course some areas need further analysis. So, Ministry of Environment recently published Estonia's sixth national communication under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and it was published last December 2013. This document provides quite a good overview of vulnerability assessment, climate change impacts, and adaptation measures that are already taken in Estonia. And this report also provides an overview of climate change research and systematic observations, and also activities, for example, to reduce climate change denial. Also, many of the adaptation measures are discussed in area-related strategies and action plans. For example, there are emergency acts, water acts already in place, as well as risk assessments and, for example, crisis management plans. But however, the detailed sector-specific analysis of possible climate change impacts in Estonia still need to be carried out in short time. The drafting of adaptation strategy and action plan was commenced last year in the framework of the European Economic Area Financial Mechanism, like mentioned in Latvia's presentation. And the overall goal or aim of the project is to contribute to a more climate resilient Estonia by developing a national adaptation strategy. And of course, the clear need for this adaptation strategy arise from the European Commission's white paper on adapting to climate change. So the program operator is Estonian Ministry of the Environment, and the donor program partner is Norwegian Environment Agency. And the central activities of the project will run from March 2014, this year, which is when we agreed that the project, or when we signed the project agreement between the Ministry of Environment and the project promoter, which I talk about later. And the activities will run until March 2016, which is the deadline when our national adaptation strategy draft document or proposal should be completed. And the budget for this project is approximately 1 million euros. So the project promoter is Estonian Environmental Research Center, and the project has two partners. One is Estonian Environment Agency, whose role in this project is to develop short-term and long-term climate scenarios for Estonia, and also to describe the past trends. And the second partner is Norwegian Directorate for Civil Protection and Emergency Planning, whose role is to transfer Norwegian know-how to our project on climate change adaptation, and also consult us, and also review of the analysis on climate change scenarios completed by Estonian experts. So the project foresees many activities. For example, collecting relevant scientific information about climate change and specification of topics for sector-specific assessments. The list of the priority areas are also mentioned on this slide. They are health, energy supply and industry, agriculture, use of natural resources, biological diversity, spatial planning, tourism, buildings and infrastructure, and also rescue preparedness and insurance. So the activities also include the creation of Estonia-specific climate change scenarios for the future, and describing the past trends in climate change. Also conduct of open call for sector-specific analysis that need further study or research. Also sectoral analysis and proposition of Estonia-specific climate change adaptation measures, as well as analysis of the cost of proposed adaptation measures. And the project activities also foresee conducting the strategic environmental impact assessment, and of course compilation of draft national adaptation strategy document. And the activities also foresee several public awareness activities, like creating this webpage and also some seminars are scheduled. So now a little bit information about the activities that Estonia is currently doing during the process of developing the strategy. So recently, our project promoter compiled 2 questionnaires for research and scientific institutions to identify important questions like ongoing research on climate change adaptation and open research questions to identify priority sectors and areas of vulnerability, to identify areas relevant to adaptation action, and to find out the overall willingness to contribute to the development of adaptation strategy. And the results from these questionnaires were really positive for Estonia, because most of the institutions are willing to contribute to the development of adaptation strategy. So it is really good to see that. And also the information from the questionnaires would help us to identify and agree on the priority sectors and identify research needs in the future, and also to identify what are the knowledge gaps. Also, we are setting up adaptation steering committee who will be responsible for decisions on adaptation strategy and who will assist and coordinate the development of adaptation strategy, who will steer the adaptation process, and who will discuss needs and expectations of developing adaptation strategy. And the first committee meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday already, so we are really excited about that. And the committee members are representatives of all concerned or interested government authorities, different associations and different organizations. Also, Ministry of Environment at the moment is preparing conditions and procedure for the awarding and use of EEA grants for open call. And there are actually quite many terms that need to be fixed when preparing the conditions, like setting up supported activities, eligible expenditures, non-eligible expenditures, requirements to the project applicants and project partners, how to process the applications, and procedures for assessment of the applications, and also criteria, setting up the criteria for assessment of the applications, and so on. And the open call is planned to be launched in August this year. Like I think I already mentioned, the project foresees several public activities. Shortly, we are creating an adaptation webpage that will be linked to the Ministry of Environment homepage. And it will also be linked to relevant other homepages. And also, there are a few seminars that we will schedule about sustainability. So on the basis of the strategy and on the basis of the action plan, the Ministry of the Environment will make a proposal to the government to adopt the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy. So this will be in sometime in March 2016, when the project will be at the final stage, and we have the strategy draft document. And the Estonian government will then decide what approach to use in Estonia, whether the strategy will be one comprehensive document or the topics between the topics within the strategy will be split between different existing sectoral development plans or strategies. So we also have some challenges when developing the national adaptation strategy. For example, there is a lack of knowledge on methods and approaches, how to analyze adaptation options and choose the possible actions and the possible adaptation measures. Also, research in Estonia is dispersed among a variety of institutions and variety of partners with funding from different sources. So there is also a danger for overlap and inefficient use of resources. And also there is a lack of human and institutional capacity. Okay, that was it.
Thank you very much, Katre. And now we will hear a slightly different story, because now I invite the representative of Lithuanian Ministry of Environment, and it will be different because in contrast to Latvia and Estonia, Lithuania already has an adaptation strategy. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Maybe I will start with introducing myself. I represent the Ministry of Environment of Lithuania. I'm working in the Climate Change Policy Division. Yeah. I'm working in the Climate Change Policy Division, and one of my responsibilities is also adaptation to climate change. So, in my presentation, I will focus on our experience in developing the national climate change management strategy, also on the current situation of the strategy. I will touch upon the adaptation policy itself, and will focus also on the action plan for the implementation of the strategy. So our strategy for national climate change management policy by 2050 was adopted at the end of 2012, and the interinstitutional action plan for the implementation of the goals and objectives of the strategy was adopted in 2013. This is the structure of our strategy. Well, it's quite complicated, but we have chosen the approach to prepare an integrated strategy, so it includes both mitigation goals and adaptation goals. Maybe we chose this approach for the pragmatic reasons, as it's less administrative burden to approve one document than two documents. So this strategy includes general provisions, also the conclusions of the sectorial analysis, a vision of climate change management policy, and then it sets the goals and objectives of climate adaptation as well as mitigation, the strategic goals, and those goals are divided to short-term, special mid-term goals, and long-term goals. And also we have general climate change adaptation and mitigation goals and objectives. And again, they are divided in short-term, mid-term, and long-term. This picture shows how we divided the sectors according to the influence on the development of the Lithuanian climate change management policy. And so the most relevant sectors for the adaptation. It's water resources, Baltic Sea region, landscape, ecosystems, biodiversity, air quality, and public health. So the experience in the development of a strategy. Well, the main responsible institution was the Ministry of Environment. We have contracted the experts following the public procurement procedures, so the experts were contracted to prepare the drafts, and also we have engaged the relevant ministries in the preparations of the draft. In the ministries we have appointed persons who were responsible for the coordination of the preparation of the draft, and also the ministries were obliged to provide the experts with all the relevant information, respective policies, under the competence studies, projections, research, and so on. So also the prepared draft was considered within subordinated institutions of the Ministry of Environment, within relevant departments, also with other ministries, NGO, public, and within the National Climate Change Committee, which includes the members from different ministries, also municipality representatives, science, and NGOs, non-governmental institutions. Also, we have organized the meetings to consider the comments provided by other institutions. And finally, after the draft was approved by the government, it was submitted for the approval to our parliament. The current status of the strategy, so we have adopted an adaptation policy. The measures foreseen in the strategy are being implemented, and also we have started monitoring and the evaluation procedure. Our strategy was, the preparation of a strategy was mainly based on the expert judgment and on the existing information, existing studies. So it occurred that the research in some areas is irrelevant. So we have already planned to conduct further research, and it is planned to determine the most vulnerable sectors and to propose the necessary measures. So as a short-term climate change adaptation measures, that would feed into further development of the adaptation policy in Lithuania. We plan to conduct a study that would assess vulnerability and propose effective adaptation measures and indicators for individual sectors, which are listed here. And also we have planned to conduct the evaluation of vulnerability and risks of the different regions of Lithuania. Now we move to the adaptation to climate change policy in Lithuania. So the strategic goal as set in the strategy of adaptation to climate change policy is to reduce vulnerability of natural ecosystems and national economy sectors, and to ensure favorable conditions for social life and economic activities. The implementation of a strategic goal will be assessed according to the achievement of the special climate change adaptation objectives in the most vulnerable sectors, which are listed here. Okay. And the strategic goal is implemented following the four main directions. I will not read out all the text here, but those directions are the integrated approach, the synergy between climate change mitigation and adaptation measures, and also the contribution of country-specific scientific research, and on the strengthening of knowledge bases. And here I have listed the National Climate Change Adaptation Special Short-Term Goals and Objectives by 2020. We have cross-sectorial targets and objectives, and the main focus is on mainstreaming of climate change adaptation goals, objectives and measures, implementing eco-innovative measures, monitoring and analyzing and assessing the impacts, and strengthening the coordination and dissemination of information. Also, the goals and objectives are set for agriculture and soil sector. Here I have provided some practical example. The publication issued by the Ministry of Agriculture, Adaptation to Climate Change in Agricultural Sector. This publication was prepared in the course of the implementation of the Baltic Climate Project, and it also includes the guidelines for adaptation and methodological recommendations for municipalities. So, again, moving to the goals and objectives included in our strategy by 2020. The short-term goals in forestry, ecosystem, biodiversity and landscape focus on reducing negative impact of climate change on natural ecosystems and preserving and improving sustainability of forest ecosystem and strengthening the environmental and social role. Also, as the short-term goals and measures and objectives and also measures, of course, are set for such sectors as water resources, energy, transport, industry, and public health. Here I would like to focus more on the Baltic Sea region, as it is defined as the most vulnerable sector in Lithuania, and the climate change adaptation goals and objectives for the Baltic Sea region are integrated into the sectorial targets and objectives of forest, ecosystems, biodiversity, landscape and water resources sectors. And here also I have included some examples of how we just made use of some projects by preparing publications dedicated to different stakeholders, and as a result of the Baltica project, analysis was done of the periodical floods in Klaipėda city, and this analysis includes also proposed options for adaptation. Our adaptation policy, it puts a big emphasis on the awareness raising. And one of the assessment criteria directly related to climate change adaptation goals and objectives by 2020 is fully functioning national information coordination mechanism. And last year we have issued our climate atlas of Lithuania, and also we try to involve children and young people in actions on climate change adaptation. And the Ministry of Environment will very soon issue a publication for children. We care about our climate. Here I have listed presumptions for the establishment of adaptation goals and objectives in our national policy, and priority sectors were defined following our national law on climate change instruments for climate change management, and also based on the European Union strategy for the Baltic Sea region, also on the EU adaptation strategy, and also we have studied very carefully the adaptation strategies of other EU member states such as Denmark, Finland, Germany, and used the best practices and examples in preparing our strategy. And finally, the last part of my presentation. So just in order to ensure the implementation of a strategy and just not to allow good initiatives just to burst like a bubble, we need a plan for action. And in order to ensure the implementation of a strategy, we have adopted action plan, which covers the period till 2020. And this action plan is developed according to the methodology of the strategic planning. And this methodology is approved by our government. And the plan includes includes the measures for the 3-year period, and it's updated annually. So we have now in the plan the measures till 2016, and recently have started the update of this plan, and after the approval of the government, it will include the measures for 2017. So the action plan includes general provisions, targets, objectives, and measures as set in the strategy. Also allocations, the concrete sums of money, of financial resources that are dedicated for the implementation of certain measures, and also the implementing institutions that are responsible for the implementation of certain measures. So those implementing institutions are ministries, subordinated institutions of the ministries, also municipalities, and also the action plan includes the assessment criteria and values. And besides the action plan, the ministries and other governmental institutions are encouraged to integrate the goals and objectives of a strategy, to establish the implementation measures, and to ensure close interinstitutional cooperation while developing their own strategies, their implementation plans, programs, and other documents. Currently the action plan includes climate change mitigation measures for both sectors, EU emission trading and non-trading sectors, the climate change adaptation measures for sectors that are listed in the strategy, and also measures for general climate change mitigation and adaptation objectives and targets, for the implementation of general targets and objectives. And the progress of the implementation of a strategy is evaluated by the set of criteria established by the plan. So the assessment criteria and values are set for all the targets, and those criteria are, to measure the progress, are quantitative, not qualitative. And the follow-up process, every 2 years, the government of the Republic of Lithuania prepares a report on the implementation of a strategy, and this report is submitted to the Parliament of Lithuania, and state and municipal institutions are obliged to provide Ministry of Environment with the information about the progress by submitting annual activity reports, and they also submit the reports on the planned measures that could be further included in the action plan. And also the outcomes of monitoring, reporting, and evaluation will feed into the further development of the action plan and into the update of the strategy, which is planned to be updated at 2020. And here is a nice picture of the Baltic Sea coast, and also it shows the coastal erosion of our coast. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jurgen, for a very detailed and comprehensive presentation of the situation in Lithuania. I think it was very interesting to know how the real process works. And now we have this time when everyone has an opportunity to express their opinion or ask questions to the presenters, speakers that you've seen previously. And also maybe just comments or, anything. So that's the right time for this. So, yes. And also please present yourself.
Valdur Latves, Stockholm Environment Institute, Tallinn Center. I have a question to Jurga. You have a nice strategy and the implementation plan and the reporting of the progress indicators, which are quantitative, as you said. I wonder which indicators are those, as, from your presentation, I looked very carefully, but I didn't saw any measurable goals. How do you measure goals which have no numbers? Improving, strengthening, enhancing, whatever. How you measure them quantitatively? What are those wonderful indicators?
Thank you for the question. I think those indicators to measure the achievement of our adaptation goal was, I think, the biggest headache during the development of our strategy. And therefore I have emphasized that now we have only quantitative criteria. But as I have also mentioned in my presentation, we put a lot of efforts in the further development of a strategy. We have planned to conduct studies on the vulnerability, risk assessment, identify the most vulnerable areas. So I hope we'll also, in the course of the preparation of those studies, we will be able to develop more advanced criteria, indicators for the measurement. And actually, this is the area where we need some experience of other countries and where we need some capacity building. Yes, that's true, I agree with you.
Sounds nice, but I'm not convinced, sorry. Do you have your strategy and action plan in English in some websites to get acquainted with? And whether any monitoring reports are also available just to get insight?
Our strategy is now being translated into English, so it will be available soon. And as it was adopted only in 2012, so we don't yet have the reports on the implementation, but yeah, we are in the process.
Okay, any other questions?
I put my third question, then I'll become quiet. Question to you from the EAA. You, in your presentation, emphasized the importance of the national adaptation strategies that every country should have, European Union has, 20 member countries already have. I've heard from relevant people from Finland and Sweden that despite they had national adaptation strategies in place several years, implementation of those has failed because they didn't have any measurable goals. They also had goals like improvement, strengthening, whatever, such kind of non-quantifiable goals. And therefore, they say that it's not possible to implement because nobody knows how it reflects in real life in somewhere on the field. And therefore, those two countries now are revising their national adaptation strategies in order to make them implementable. How do you feel? Is there any assessment made by the EEA or Commission about those 20 member states' national adaptation strategies, how good they are, how useful they are in achieving the goals?
Thank you. This is a very good question you have brought up. There are several answers. The first one is you are completely right. A strategy on its own is not very helpful. It has to have goals which are measurable, and this helps to implement them. We are now, as I said in my presentation, preparing a report on the assessment of adaptation strategies and actions in Europe. This report is based on a self-assessment. That means we have sent a questionnaire to our network, to the IONET network, and we have asked our colleagues in the countries to assess the state and the success of their policy process on the strategies and plans and measures, clustered regarding several questions on this policy cycle I have brought up in my presentation. My colleague Stefan Isoar was responsible for the report, so I don't have special insights. This report will come out in the third quarter of this year. There you can have a look how the countries themselves assessed the success. Besides this, the Commission is preparing guidance for reporting on the success of the adaptation process in connection with the monitoring regulation, the MMR regulation. And they are at the moment preparing guidance, and from the 15th of, I think, March of next year, the reports should be available from the countries. That means we have different levels of assessment, self-assessment, and some kind of analysis EEA has done on these results delivered by the countries, and this official assessment. But there's a third answer. We, in the frame of Climate Adapt, we are looking for at the available literature and to see what practical experiences comes up from the countries. And we are preparing case studies on implemented actions. And following this path, seeing the experiences, there are implemented measures. And not everything is covered, not every sector at the same percentage, but there are experiences available, and we will show you in the session afterwards, at the afternoon, how to access them. But we're completely sure in the assessment that there are not so many implemented actions or information on implemented actions available, and I also know that the development of indicators is still in an early phase. We have indicators in some member states on the success in some sectors, how they proceed on the way to adaptation, but the so-called governance indicators, how we have successfully implemented the strategies, it's still in the development phase. So I understood your question to the Lithuanian colleague to see the measurable indicators. Thanks.
I think there is another comment on the same topic.
So my name is Jana Kaipainen, and I come from Finland, Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. I'm sorry to hear that you think that we failed with our strategy implementation. I see things differently. We have been revising our strategy because I think there's time for a different kind of approach now. We have been using a kind of measurable indicator for sectors to estimate their adaptation, kind of how well they have been adapting, and it's 5-step indicator, and it's based kind of self-evaluation. So we have some kind of indicator, but I'm totally agreeing with you that we have a lot of things to do with follow-up and finding out how to measure how effective we have been. And that's kind of the challenge for the future. And I will be giving the presentation on our national strategy and the revision tomorrow, so I will tell you more about that then.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Hello, I'm Selina Wansan. I'm Latvian Green Movement representative. I also work for the Bankwatch Network as a EU campaigner. So my question is related to the finance. I want to be sure that all the strategy on the paper should be there, implemented, and you have the finance available for that. So My question will be dedicated to all, for each member of each country, of the ministries. As you know, Europe's Commission has required 20% allocation from the EU funds for the climate change adaptation and mitigation activities. Do you know what is the number of the allocation, the percentage of the allocation for these activities in your country? Because I think it's not enough for... The number is not 20 for each country at the moment, so do you have any comments on this and how to put this in place? Thank you.
So, who can answer this question? That was to the ministries. Jyrki, maybe you can tell about a little bit, since you already have the strategy, how is the financing organized, and what are the sources that you're using?
So, as I have mentioned, we have approved our action plan, and all the measures that are included in the action plan, they all have finance allocated, and we use finance from the state budget, also from the municipalities' budget, from the EU funds, and also from other sources available. So, just once more, I would like to emphasize that the actions that we include in our action plan, they will be implemented as the financing is available. Otherwise, we won't be included in the action plan. So, okay.
Thank you.
I'm not a government official, but I'm from Lithuania, and I know a little bit how the process is planned. To answer the question of Latvian Green Movement representative, I should say that this is a requirement of the European Commission to have minimum 20%. So this requirement will have to be followed. So the question is not probably how many percents the countries have actually reached in calculating and proving this 20%, but probably the question which is important, how exactly they do calculate this, because a lot of actions or measures planned and attributed sort of to climate change might not necessarily be very straightforward climate change actions. So I think the methodology on how countries do this and what impact in the end finally they will those measures will have on climate change, that's the important topic for discussion. Thank you.
Any other questions? Maybe I can ask a question to, I don't know who will want to answer this, but I think we didn't hear that much about challenges. We've heard about challenges foreseen by Lithuania and Estonia in the process of development of the strategy, but and actually we have seen that one of the main issues is lack of knowledge and understanding of this issue. How I think it's actually quite interesting. What was the response of Lithuanian sectoral ministries on this strategy? How were they eager to integrate climate change targets in their policies? Because okay, Ministry of Environment can develop the strategy, but then what we're talking about this, transfer it to the sectoral policies. Can you comment on this? Yes, maybe if I know there's a Ministry of Agriculture from Lithuania, maybe you want to comment.
Thank you. Shortly, I am from the Ministry of Agriculture of Lithuania, so of course we are very involved in with our national strategy as other ministries, for example, transport sector, as we are included, and our measures are included also, and criteria. But if shortly to say about agricultural sector, As you know, in the new Common Agricultural Policy from 2013 and 2020, climate change measures, or how to say, greening measures are also very important. And for example, if you take a first pillar, which is called in agricultural sector direct payments, 30% of total envelope of every member state goes to greening measures, which are very related with climate change measures. If you take second pillar, I mean rural development, every member state must prepare its own rural development program for this new period. And again, in this second pillar, every member state must allocate 30% of total envelope to greening measures. So actually, talking about our sector, our role in our national strategy, most of the elements and measures comes from EU first and second pillar, and of course we are talking about co-financing, national financing and EU financing. So as I know, this month we also must notify to the European Commission our national rural development plan, and in this plan you could see our measures for climate change and adaptation. And one of our priority is biogas power stations to improve this situation and to reduce nitrogen emissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valdur Latvia, Stockholm Environment Institute Talent Center. My question is to the distinguished representative of the Ministry of Agriculture of Lithuanian Republic. You mentioned one example from your rural development plan, which is to be financed in the future, which is a deployment of the biogas support, probably investment support to building the biogas plants. That's measure for the mitigation, and must say very good measure. But looking for the goals for the agricultural sector from the National Adaptation Strategy of Lithuania, which, as I wrote correctly, was increase of resistance of agricultural sector to the climate change. Can you bring 3 examples of the priority actions in your rural development plan which address that very increasing resistance of the agricultural sector to the climate change?
Can you answer?
Maybe I couldn't answer very exact to this question. You mean about resistance of agricultural sector? Yeah, so I think that our main goal is now not about resistance, but to reduce this climate change itself as possible. And yes, and our goal, the main goal is this, and we have a lot to do in this area. And European Commission also said that it sees in Lithuania, it sees most potential to reduce climate change in transport and in agricultural sector. So, yeah, one of the main sectors where we could do a lot job in adapting to climate change. But of course, we could, if you like, we could give more exact answer to you by email later on our concrete measures from rural development program. Thank you.
do you have anything to add? Anything to add?
May I use the chance just to discuss a little bit, because our institute has been assessed Estonian partnership agreement and the operation plan for the structural funds 2016 to 2020, and is going to assess also the national rural development plan, to meeting the climate objectives of the EU and policy goals. But we see very little, actually, if we consider adaptation. In Estonian operational plan, there is only one measure, actually, largely, which addresses the adaptation, and this is the increasing the capacity of rescue departments to fight forest fires, detect, monitor the forest fires, and to purchase a firefighting trucks, and that's it. So I'm afraid that if we plan our strategies on adaptation until 2020, very big portion of public monies are locked to the other measures, not for the adaptation measures, which means that we have lost opportunity to change very radically some. No? I think that there was many presentations said that there is a lack of awareness, and really we can use this time until 2020 then to raise awareness. Perhaps that is very much needed then. But let's say it and openly this, not hide behind that, oh, we have wonderful action plans and we do a major change in the adapting climate.
Thank you. Would you like to answer this?
Just one remark. I forgot to mention from National Rural Development Program, we have one measure, training and of farmers, learning and training. And a lot of money goes to this particular measure. So I think when we are talking about adaptation to climate change, training our farmers is also very important, because to this date, maybe not every farmer cares about climate change. So we see also here a big potential according to this measure.
Thank you. Will there be any other questions? Maybe.
Hello, my name is Martin Mandel. I'm from Ministry of Agriculture from Estonia. And I would just like to mention that, yes, Valdur is right that adaptation is not so important part of the RDP of the next period. But concerning greening, one essential part of greening is crop diversification, which is basically adaptation measure. And also I would like to add that advisory system and training climate change will be a very important part of it in the next period. Thank you.
Hello, colleagues. I have a question both to Lithuanian and Estonian colleagues. Speaking on agriculture, one of the very useful and modern measure in agriculture is or would be insurance. Have you such insurance on yield? Crop yields or cattle insurance, specific insurance in agriculture? Because in Latvia we have, it's difficult how to implement, but we have. Thank you.
Yes, in Lithuania we also have state aid for insurance of crops, but yes, to say its potential is also not used because it's not very cheap and not a lot of farmers use, despite of that state provide aid for insurer. But again, we see that in the future, maybe farmers, and taking into account our climate conditions which change every year and disasters, this insurance measure will become more and more popular.
My answer is basically the same as my Lithuanian colleague, that we had this state aid at the moment. I'm not 100% sure, but a few years ago we had it, and it wasn't very successful because we don't have this crop insurance market is not developed, so it's not very common for farmers to use it. And I'm not very sure about the future, whether we are going to have some kind of solution for that or not.
Thank you. Maybe any other sectors, health, maybe anyone? I know that we do have ministries of health represented here too. No, well, if there are no more questions, we could probably finish this first session. We will be served lunch very soon, as far as I understand. Just if you have any last questions, we could go through them. If no, then thank you very much. And I think that was very useful. At least a few important issues were raised, and lunch will be served in the same room. It's already outside, so waiting for you. And we'll start again at 1:45 with some more scientific presentations. And yes, so have a nice meal, everyone.